We're live. Hello and welcome to a Jump Advisory Group webinar. The first in a series of Start Your Team Performance, okay, or Jumpstart Your Team Performance. With us today we have Paul Sharpe and we have Dave Pye, who will introduce you to later. As we sort of get moving on, if people can drop a quick note to us to say that they can hear us, because obviously it's important that we can hear you, okay, and you can see us from there. So if you just drop a note down in the boxes, it'd be very much appreciated, and we can work from there. As people start to come in, there's already 40 people in, which is really good. It's a really busy webinar, this one. There's lots of people on, that's great. So thank you for Annette, Tom, Paul and Laura who's saying there, and good morning Nicola from there, and good morning Desiree. Okay, so we've got 45 minutes. The idea is what we're going to do is we're going to give you 45 minutes of our time with regards to the things that we believe will jumpstart your team performance. What we've got to start to think about is that we're going to do 4 webinars, and each one will be a different part of your team performance. And the last one, we're going to bring in a sporting star who will announce at the end, who's taken teams into the Premiership and taken teams to World Cups, and all about building uniform teams that unify each other based on various core products. And when you start to analyze that against the recruitment industry, it is so apt. It is very, very apt. So let me introduce Paul. Paul Sharpe is just approaching 20 years. He's one of the co-founders of Jump, a background in selling what we would call the big ticket items. So when he says, I've done a deal, his deals are normally between 20 and 30 million pounds, where my deal was normally between about 10 and 15k. So he was used to that. But what he's doing for us and what he's helping Jump with is building RPO type offerings for the SME marketplace and developing those into the SME marketplace. Also great with writing tenders and pitching clients from there. So the big ticket sales and how we can develop that down. Dave Pye. Dave Pye is 30 plus years in the industry, well-known business leader, was head of Spring for quite an awful long time and has been on his own as an advisor for the last 10 years, joined with Jump as part of the REC webinar when Paul Jacobs and I were on the REC webinars, and he's now the CEO, non-exec director for a number of large recruitment agencies and small SMEs. I'm Howard Greenwood, for those who don't know me. I've got just approaching 30 years of recruitment, background in tech recruitment in the main, again, from Adecco. I was a board director for Adecco Technology, which included Computer People and Spring. I've been working with small recruitment agencies and large recruitment agencies in the last 3 or 4 years, was helping Paul Jacobs develop a Love Work Life, which is now, when we sort of looked at that and we came together, we created Jump from there. So let me start this off today, because we spent an awful lot of time sort of planning what we were going to talk about and planning what we were going to do. And it was really important that when we started to talk about the plans, that we started to look at what the plans were and how those plans would manifest themselves into this meeting. So the first question I'm going to ask, and it's a bit of a sort of strange question when you start to put it in these terms. The first question that I'm going to ask is, guys, I'm going to go to Paul Sharpe first. Once we finish this webinar, let's say 12 o'clock, what's the first thing you're going to do and take back to your team? What's the first thing you'd want to take back to your team?
Thanks, Howard, and thanks. I don't know about you guys, but I actually had butterflies last night. I was so excited at the first of these webinars with you guys as part of Jump. For the few of you that have actually messaged me, and I have had a few messages, I did ask whether I could play Jump by Van Halen, but I was absolutely categorically told not by my co-founders. Otherwise, I would have done. So it's a really good question, and we debated this as a team yesterday. I'm going to start off with a quote, and I'm going to probably end on it as well. And the quote I'm going to share is, "Live today like you mean it. Live today like you mean it." And so I think for me, Howard, the first thing that, as leaders and business owners we need to do is we need to recalibrate the vision for the business. And, sometimes I think people can think, vision, mission and strategy and plan is for, big organizations and big agencies. It's absolutely not. Every business, whether you're 1, 2, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people, should have a really clearly defined vision. And it's really important you check that, because a lot has changed over the last 6 months. Markets have changed, opportunities have changed, things have materialized that weren't there before. So rechecking that is really important. And it's really important because people want to know why they're doing things. And the why should and needs to be aligned back to a vision. And if they know why they're doing it, then it gives people a sense of purpose. And that purpose is really important. And if you read some of the research that's been done recently around, what motivates people and demotivates people, working from home remotely and everything else, having that purpose and sense of purpose in terms of what they contribute to an organization trying to achieve its vision is one of the most crucial factors out there. So I would, for me, Howard, and you know how passionate I feel about this, I think for me, it's about rechecking what the vision is, making sure it's fit for purpose, and getting your head in the space that you believe it's important. Focus on the things that you can influence, forget the things you can't, focus on the business, have a really proper plan, and absolutely go for it.
It's really interesting when we talk about that. It's all about that fostering positive environments and positive team cultures, and it's sort of interesting how we sort of bring those all together. And it's interesting the quote there from Eli on the screen that it's always down to people, and it is down to people. Dave, I'm interested in your comments on that one as well.
There's loads of jump type music, Paul, isn't there, we could use? So I've still got a relatively young family, and one of the songs that binds us together is Jump Around by the House of Pain. It's broken many a light bulb and crashed many a cup in our living room when we've used that. So maybe we could start with one of those songs. For me, it's interesting, isn't it? You use the word why, Paul. One of the great authors on why is Simon Sinek. Whenever I'm working with any of my clients, I try to encourage them to go onto YouTube and just have a look at the Simon Sinek TED Talk on why, the purpose and the power of why, and it's so important. And back to your question, Howard, about what do you do at 12 o'clock, is I would absolutely go back as a leader right now and have a look at your purpose. Simon Sinek has written a new book called The Infinite Game, and in it there is a beautiful little quote which says, "Time is always the great revealer of truth." And one of the things that we've had in these last 6 months, 7 months or so is time. We've had time away from our work colleagues. We've had time going between offices and home. We've had time to think about what we're going to do, how we're going to navigate this. And as leaders, in that time, it has revealed to us which of our people have been able to cope, which have needed more support, which have been able to step up, and also where we're going to go. And the thing that will define that, to what Paul was saying, is the purpose of the business. Why are you as a leader doing what you are doing? What is the purpose for you as a leader, for you as the person leading your family, and how does that relate to the business that you are running? What is the purpose of that business? And if I were you at 12 o'clock, I'd just take a few minutes. You can't go to Pret, or maybe you can if you're working in the office, but go and just take a little bit of time to think about, actually, what is it that I'm about? What is it that this business is about? Has that changed because of what's happened with COVID? Or is it now just a different dynamic? Are we working in a different way? And then it's about communicating that purpose to each of your people so that they know their part in it. That famous old saying, "What's in it for me?" has never been more important, because people want to work for people and for companies with a purpose. One thing, if we've learned about COVID and this whole disruption that we've all navigated through, is that there is a real hunger for connection. People want to be connected to people they believe in, to organizations they believe in, to purposes that they believe in. So at 12 o'clock, go back and just have a look at what your purpose is, what you're about, and then try to transmit that. We'll come on to that to the rest of your team.
I think another point, Dave, you've just triggered a thought there. I think, in these times, there's so much uncertainty out there and fear. And again, you know, giving people that vision for what your organisation is about, I think it allays some of that fear and gives people a little bit more certainty in an uncertain time. So
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, important just to align those two things, because I think the impact is broader than sometimes what we understand as leaders.
I think to sort of align that even further, though, guys, when we start to look at that, and one thing that I've worked at all the time when we talk about vision and purpose, it's all right, you as the leader having vision and purpose. It's how do you align that back to your desk, and how do your staff take that vision and purpose? So it's how you then go back to your staff and what you do with your staff. And I always talk about that sort of creating shared information and becoming sort of part of the team and part of the human part of the team. And I remember sort of certain when traveling around sort of at Deco, going around to all the offices, I made a point of sitting and having lunch with all my team so I could sit and have open discussions. I could find out what was being successful within the business. I found out what people were doing within the business. I looked at things that were great achievements so I could actually highlight those, but I was listening to the moans and the groans of the people, because what I wanted to do is make sure that they were happy within the business. And as people come back from furlough, they're going to have moans and groans. So that face-to-face communication, being part of that team, is going to become really important. That you've got to be that sort of person that creates the passion. You've got to be that person that creates the enthusiasm in the team. We always talk about, you know, being a leader, that you are the catalyst to releasing your team's performance. So purpose and the purpose and vision of the business is really important, but you, as the leader of the business, have to display that purpose and vision to your team, because that becomes infectious. It becomes part of the team ethos and part of the team moving forward. So I think when we're talking in that fashion, you know, to me, it's about making sure that your team understand the vision and purpose, and that you've aligned that back to your desk, and you ensure that your people understand it.
And it's funny, H, actually, because you've just used the word, which is a really interesting word to use in a COVID world. You use the word infectious. And we know from our medical meetings and all the things that we've been taught that there's this thing called the R rate, and one person infects somebody else and it goes and it goes. Well, if you flip that the other way to business, the R rate of purpose is so important. If you can command that, if you're the leader of your business, and whether you've got 3 people in your company or 33 people or 333, your role as the leader is to be infectious. It's a negative word normally, but in this sense, it's quite a positive word. Your role is to be infectious, to let people know this is what we're about, this is your part in it, and to tell everybody else. And if all 30 of you in your business are singing from the same song sheet, can understand what the business is about, your attitude to clients, your attitude to candidates, your attitude to the society in which you're serving or the industry in which you're serving, then I think you've got a really positive thing to look forward to as you look at 12 o'clock today and think, right, what am I going to do? What am I going to get from this webinar?
So let's look at that in a slightly different way then, because obviously that's what we're going to do when we go straight back. You know, we've got 15 minutes when this webinar finishes to plan what we're going to say to our people and do that. But we've got 7 days, and we're talking about 7 days of re-energizing your business and creating the business. So what do you think is the most important things to get across to the business in the next 7 days? Dave, let's carry on your conversation from there.
Yeah, for me, it's there's a real challenge, there's a real tension for leaders. And the 2 words that I use to describe it are pace and grace. So we're in business to place people, to find people jobs. You know, our business, we want to make money, we want to recover perhaps some of the challenges we've had over the last 6 months. And as leaders, we know absolutely that if we can generate money and generate profit and cash, can hold on to more of our people, or we can grow and we can invest. So there's a real sense of pace. There's a real sense of we've really got to get going. There are numbers to hit. There are things that people have got to do. There are candidates they've got to send out. You know, we all know what we have to do in that situation. But at the same time, there are people who are worried about what's going on. They may be worried about their jobs. They may be worried about coming back from furlough at the end of next month. There is going to be a sense of what is this all about? And as a leader, it's holding in tension that balance between the pace and the urgency that's really important to keep the business going and getting it going in the next 7 days, but also having the grace to recognize that different people have different mindsets. And sometimes it's easier if you've got 4 staff, because you can just talk to each of them individually over Zoom, or if you're in the office. If you've got 40 staff, it's a little bit more difficult, but then you may have a leadership structure where you can involve others in it. But it's just understanding their mindset, giving them the grace to say, look, this is where we are, this is where you are, this is where you're going to be, and this is how I'm going to help you get there. And it's getting that tension and putting those two things together. I think just being bombastic and telling people you've got to do this, that will get you so far, but you need that a little bit more of an accommodating mindset. You need to show a little bit more grace to bring them along with you, to encourage them. And I think together, as a leader, you can really transform and accelerate performance in the next 7 days.
It's interesting. It's about bringing the people along with you, and it's about, we talked a lot on the webinars that we've done before this about the ripple effect of a manager walking into the room and the ripple effect of the manager walking out of the room. And it's really important that if your ripple effect as you walk into the room is all about positivity and driving positivity going forward, and then when you close the door, it creates the same ripple effect, rather than as a manager when you walk into the room and you create fear. Because what I can guarantee, when you walk out the room and you close that door, the reverse ripple is relief that you've gone out the room, and that doesn't engender sort of development and stuff like that. So, Paul, give us your version of what you'd be thinking, the things you want to get across to the business in the next 7 days.
So I think there's 2 things. I think just piggybacking off the back of what Dave has said, I think some Harvard research that came out this week that said that when you and it was regarding remote working. And it said when you tell people, where they've got to work, then productivity and motivation drops by 17 points, which is actually quite a big drop. When you give people the choice or the option, then it doesn't drop at all. So I think that choice thing is really important. And that plays into the blog that I sent out this morning on LinkedIn. And it's also on the website if anybody wants to read it, around culture. And we use this word new normal. I actually hate it because I don't think there's one version of the new normal. I think there's many versions of the new normal. But I think, building that culture of trust and asking people is really important. But I won't give too much away because it's all in that blog. I think conversely, there's a second angle to this, which is about making sure that you've got, because you very much talk about, taking people on the journey and asking and coaching and they're all the right things, by the way. But I've been asked this question so many times over the past 3 or 4 weeks. What do you do with people that don't want to go on that journey, don't buy into the culture, and, don't feel positive about, the future of the business going forward? And I think as much as there's a coaching and a taking people on the journey with you for the vast majority of people, I do think the second thing that leaders need to do, and they need to do it now, is look at the teams and make sure that those people in the teams are going to go on this journey, they're up for the fight, and they passionately believe in the vision and the purpose of the company. Because if they don't, they're gonna dilute what you're trying to achieve. And I think, I was asked the question this morning, and Howard, you've got the same question. What do you do with, team members that, aren't up for the future? They're negative, their interest is themselves, and they don't necessarily buy into the vision of the business going forward. And for me, it's about using this opportunity to make sure you've got the right attitudes in the business. And a really good quote from Simon Sinek, which I think is important, is customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. I think that's a really powerful quote from Simon Sinek. So I would urge everybody to go back to the business at 12 o'clock and ask the question, which one of the teams would you say, yes, that they support that and they absolutely love the company that they work for, and which are the employees that don't? And I would take attitude over performance all day long. So that would be my second part of what to do when going back into the business at 12 o'clock, Howard.
I think it's interesting when you sort of look at that in that way, that when I start to sort of read the sort of things that you guys are saying there, it's about how the employees fit into the plan. So to me, the first thing that I'd be doing now in the next 7 days is getting that plan concrete, getting that plan set out. What am I doing now? What am I doing in the next 3 months? What we're doing in the next 6 months? What we're doing in the next 12 months? But what I want to do is how the people fit in that plan. What is their purpose in that plan, and how do they fit? Because they need to feel secure. They need to feel comfortable within that plan. And some of the things I remember you would talk about how people fit into the business. I remember sort of going to my first big management position, and I had two people in the room fighting over who was going to be the next sort of leader type scenario. And it was really interesting that my choices were made based on exactly what you were saying there, Paul. Who's the person that loves the business? Who's the person that's committed to the business? Who's the person that's committed to the actual plan that's going ahead? And that's what we did. We worked out who was the right people within the business. It took us a while to get the right people, but once we did and everyone knew the plan, we started to move that plan forward. And a lot of that was about how we treated the people. And one of the things I was very purpose about was I would correct in private and praise in public. So it was always about correcting in private and praising in public. So I'd stop communicating bad news. I'd stop communicating mistakes. I'd only communicate positivity and positive news. So then it was all about the team and how they fitted into that. So it was about gathering feedback. And I think one of the things I'd also be doing now as I'm coming back over the next 7 days, I'd want the feedback from my staff, how they feel, what they feel like. And I'd be doing some form of staff analysis of what's going on. I've done one of those with one of my clients just recently, and they were quite surprised at some of the analysis that came back and what went on with that. And it was a really interesting sort of view from their point of view of, wow, that's exactly how my staff feel. That's very different to what my thoughts were. And that means that we were talking about having those two people sort of, you've got you as the management and the leadership team and your team. If you're not actually ingrained together and joined together, then there's an issue. So it sort of enabled them to sort of become one symbiotic sort of team rather than two disparate teams going in different directions. So it was about the small talk. It was about the effects of gathering feedback to ensure that everybody was pointing in the right direction. So it wasn't about punishing failure or punishing mistakes. It was about embracing them and making them better, but looking at the plan that we had. And we talked about this before I remember being a small kid when we'd have family holidays, and we had very few family holidays as small kids. My dad was a workaholic and hated going anywhere, basically. But I remember sat down at the dinner table one day and he said, right, we're going to plan a holiday. And because we were part of the planning of the holiday, part of the journey of the holiday, we were so more excited about going on that holiday. And then when we got on the holiday, it was about, right, let's make the plan happen and realize that plan. And it was such a different sort of view of things that were happening at that moment in time, because we were small kids. We never sort of had that vision. But to me, that's what people need now in the business. They need to be part of the plan and excited about where the plan was going.
Using that analogy, it's almost the, this is the vision for the holiday, right guys, how do we make this happen? And the how stimulates motivation. One of the questions I get asked is how can you motivate people, particularly those working remotely? And one of the answers to that is creating the environment whereby people have got to solve problems or be creative, work with their colleagues in terms of coming up with a solution. And I think that's a really great way. Just to pick up on the point about the staff survey bit, I think that is really important, Howard. And that's certainly something that I've done in my previous roles. I think doing that on a regular basis, every quarter is really key. I think having some consistent questions that you ask all the time is really important. And one of them would be, do you have confidence in the ability of the owner, CEO, in terms of the running of the business? And I think understanding how people are feeling is really important. But it's the old adage, isn't it? Don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. But I think equally what you measure speaks volumes about your culture. And I think if you're not measuring how people feel about you in terms of your leadership skills, in terms of the business, in terms of the culture, the management, I think you're absolutely missing a trick. So I think, on a regular basis, everybody should be absolutely doing that.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because last week there was a brilliant survey in the Times about companies that have performed best during the pandemic and what were the top 5 reasons. And I think if we can bottle those 5 reasons and make a difference in the next 7 days in the businesses in which we run, it will make a difference. Number 1, they were satisfied with how the company was communicating. So to your point, Paul, about surveys, it's a really important thing, a really important aspect that you can do. They know what they should be focusing on. There's some people are still at home on their own. What are they focusing on? Do they know what they're doing? And that goes back to our first question on purpose. The third one was the company's response to their own individual situation. And again, you pick these things up in surveys and in meetings and in things that we're doing now. Do they feel well supported? And the fifth most important one is they believe that the company is responding and cares about their mental well-being. So let's say this. They were the 5 things that accelerative performance companies over the last 6 months, they were the 5 things that their staff said made them perform better.
So let's take this in a slightly different view, because we've just been joined by Paul Jacobs, who was on client site this morning. And
hello, guys.
Finally got himself on.
Yeah.
So, Paul, the question there, I'm sure you picked up on the question. The question that we were asking there was, in the next 7 days, what is it important that you get across to the business? We've talked an awful lot about that. So just very quickly interject on your thoughts on that.
Well, okay. Hi, everybody. I've just been talking to a client. I've been in their meeting for the last 2 hours. And part of the subject matter was this discussion around the announcements last night and the impact that the new sort of semi-lockdown, if that's the phrase, is having on people. A lot of conversation around that. And I think this leads neatly into this conversation. I think that people need to feel safe and secure. People need to feel that they're working in an environment which is safe. We were talking about this earlier. It's quite conceivable that your workplace is perhaps outside of your own home the safest place you can be in many respects, provided you're following COVID regulations and precautions. I think that as a leader, it's important for us to get across the message that whilst we live in deeply uncertain times and that it's constantly moving and changing, very clearly doesn't appear to be much of a strategy coming from the government at the moment. I think the truth is that we as leaders need to keep calm heads, make sure, and I'm just picking up on the point about the survey, which I think is a great idea, that we're close to our people. But importantly, I think we have to be calm and we have to have a clear head. And this point about the vision, where the business is going, to reconfirm where we're going as an organization is so important. And I think we're talking about the next 7 days. Let's really get a sense of excitement and opportunity into the people that are working in the business. Just coming off the call I've come off of, we've been working on making exclusive placements, retained business opportunities with clients using a video platform. And the feedback's been absolutely brilliant. We've literally filled every single role that we've taken on this preferred basis. And that's only happened since we've introduced this platform over the last 2.5 months. There's a lot of business opportunity out there. And I think it's very important that as business leaders, we remain calm, we remain, I think, very focused, but above all, we remain extremely optimistic. And I think that's what we have to get into our people. Certainly to Paul's point, let's make sure that people are feeling comfortable and secure and safe. And certainly I feel that one of the things that has been missing, and Dave picked up on this a minute ago, is this is the interaction. People are saying to me, and I've been in quite a few offices recently, they've really missed being in the office, just having a chat with the guys in the office, having a giggle, having a laugh, having a cup of coffee and a sandwich at lunchtime, just that social interaction. And they're loving being back in the workplace again. And I don't think that there is necessarily a gap between the fact that businesses are becoming more productive and that coincides with the fact that we're back in the office. So I think that what we've got to do as leaders is really push forward this positivity, the vision for the business, and make sure that we provide that sense of security and optimism as we go forward now.
So that's interesting. That leads us sort of into the sort of next question, and the final question that we sort of posed ourselves today is, how do you get your team to buy into the plan with passion. So let's go back to Dave and see what Dave's comment on that is.
I think you start with a positive. You remind your team, look how far we've come. We're still here. Most recruitment businesses are still here. Some have thrived. Some have managed to survive despite all sorts of things that have been thrown at them. And the important thing is, remind them in these 7 days as you look ahead, we're still here. This is the journey we're going on. Start with the positive and begin to explain what's to come and what you're going to be doing. Reinforce connection. Really important, because there are some, like Paul, I've been to some of my clients in their offices, but there are some that are still at home, and there are some that have got the mixture of the two. And that connection and that cohesion is so important. And as a leader, you've got to reinforce the fact that your company is a family of people. It's 3, it's 4, it's 50, it's 60, it's 100, whatever it is, where you can have an opportunity to connect. Make that connection happen and make sure that you're showing interest in them. As a leader, I think it's important to be humble and to be human, to show your side. If you are struggling with certain things that you want to communicate, and it's okay to do so, that's really important as well. The best leaders I've seen in the last sort of 6 or 7 months that I've been working with are the ones who've really given of themselves and shown themselves to be leaders. They've explained their situation and they've related it to the business, they've related it to the personal side. And that transparency is important. And I think that calmness about being a leader, you're at the top, you're spinning a number of plates, you may be concerned about all sorts of things, but outwardly you're calm and you're showing that decisive leadership that's necessary. I think that's a very, very important. And your personality will help get you through. So I think those things will help in the week ahead.
I think it's interesting that you sort of say that, Dave, that we look at that. And I go back to a situation when I was as a recruiter, and I was on client site, and I'd placed a candidate on site. I'd gone to meet the candidate, and I was sat having a conversation with the HR director. And as I'm sat there, guy walks down the office. The candidate that I'd placed in there stops the guy and says, "Excuse me, can I just ask a question? I'm just having a little problem with this tech thing." The guy sat down, and he sat down with this guy for about half an hour. It was bringing other people in, helping them, etc., and off they go. And this is a very large international business. And I turned to the HR director after about 10 minutes and said, "Who is that guy?" And she said, "That's the CEO. He flew in from America yesterday, and he'll spend time with everybody and anybody. All they have to do is ask." And it was just showing that it was a simple tech problem, and he was helping the guide solve the tech problem, which would be solving one of their clientele's problems. And it was how he engaged with the business. And it was absolute, to me, a demonstration of what leaders should really be like. Mr. Jacobs, let's get back to you on your thoughts of, how do you get the team to buy into the plan with passion?
Well, I think passion's a very valid word, isn't it? I think it's exactly what we as leaders need to demonstrate. You've got to demonstrate passion and fervor yourself in order to get other people around you to demonstrate it. We're talking here about real fast action, getting people back into the workplace in the right mindset, very clear, good quality communication, making sure as leaders we're taking on board people's views, their ideas, their passion for the business, how we're going to move forward. I talked earlier, just a moment ago, about innovating, doing things differently, looking to talk to clients about what else we can do for them, land and expand, getting into companies, upselling, cross-selling, looking at assisting them nationally as well. But I think this whole point about passion it's not that difficult, because I think that I'm very certain that the people listening to us right now are, all of them without exception, passionate about what they do for a living, passionate about their profession, passionate about their expertise, passionate about their business. The people I work with, the people you guys work with, passion literally pours out of them as individuals. If anything, you could argue that we care too much, if there's such a thing. So I think if we exhibit that passion ourselves, then it's infectious. And that infection, that getting people to buy into us and the business and where we're going, despite all of the challenges, makes what we do such a viable thing, such an exciting thing. You know, I did, quick story, but I did some work several years ago of all places. I was working in Serbia, and not Siberia, but Serbia. And on a Saturday night, after I'd worked with these guys who were setting up a recruitment company there, the former sort of Yugoslavia, they took me on a tour around a city called Novi Sad. Novi Sad's a very big city. It's a beautiful place, and it's got a medieval wall around it. But they took me past some ruins, and I asked what the ruins were, and they said, oh, well, this was the press building that was bombed by the United Nations during the war. And I said, my God, you must have been kids when this happened. It must have been terrifying. What they said to me was never sort of left me. They said, you know, you might think that, but as children, as young people, as teenagers, it was the most exciting time of our lives. You know, there were street parties every day, even though the bombs were falling and we were in war. It was that sort of heightened sense of living was so exciting. And I know it's a bizarre story to relay, and it just struck me at the time where I thought it would be terrifying. They're reminded of how exciting that time of their lives were. Now, I'm not suggesting we're in war at the moment. I mean, clearly it's not as bad as that. But, you know, getting people to buy into what we're trying to achieve during extremely challenging times is almost warlike. And as leaders, we have to be up for it, passionate, really into where we're taking the company, having that vision for the future, even though we maybe have a few concerns and doubts ourselves, never demonstrating those worries or concerns, always being positive and upbeat. And I think getting people to pull together during these challenging times is exciting, a bit like that story I've just told you. And I think that's our opportunity now in the next week, get people into it. Let's just ignore the negativity we're hearing at the moment in the press and just get everybody focused. There are business opportunities out there. Lots of our clients are really expanding their businesses at the moment. They've come a long way forward since we came back from lockdown, and most, if not all of them, are performing at a higher level than they anticipated. I think that's the thing we've got to grip and hold on to and really push forward over the next few months as we head towards Christmas.
We talked about passion when we first came on, Paul, and it was interesting. And I think intense passion is infectious. We taught it, and I think that enhances commitment, it enhances efficiency, productivity, and it creates that ultimate team success. And that's what you're going to need to move forward. Paul Sharpe, your comments.
Well, the only stories I can tell is going to France Telecom in Bristol, as it used to be known, Woods in Burnley. So I can't really compete with that. I think for me, it comes back to, you know, again, I've talked previously around the trust triangle and building trust with people and building trust with clients, by the way. And, you know, one of the key elements or the key cornerstones of trust for me, two of the key cornerstones, is being authentic and empathy. And with empathy, it's about proper listening to people. And I think, you know, it's already been said, but, you know, just to really emphasize, understanding now what people's motivations and aspirations are, what the goals are, what's important to them in life is really important. And I mean, proper listening. For some people, some of those values and aspirations and motivations have been reset with COVID. Things that weren't important are now important and vice versa. So I think doing that is really, really important. I think focusing on people's strengths is a second bit. You know, we've talked about that a lot. I always remember an article, and I'm not a Man United fan, by the way, but Alex Ferguson talks about this 5-to-1 rule. And somebody asked him this question about, you know, how did you make David Beckham one of the best footballers in the world? And he just turned around and said 5-to-1. And obviously everybody was thinking, what's 5-to-1? And the story that he told was that with his team, he told them 5 really exceptional positive things and focused on one thing to do better. So he tells this story, you know, with David Beckham, every day, every week, he told him he was the best person that could take free kicks in the world. And you know, sure and behold, he became one of, you know, arguably the best sort of free kick takers in the world. So I think focusing upon the strengths is really important. The last thing I'll just add, just before handing over, is I think in times like this, we forget the importance of development and learning. And, you know, learning and development is one of the key things that keeps people inspired and motivated. And people have either got to learn from the leader, or you've got to create a learning environment and culture so that people, even at these times when it's difficult and challenging, all the rest of it, they think their personal development is going up a level each month, each year. So keeping that focus on individual personal development, I think, is really key.
I think as managers, I think just to sort of finish this topic off, is that the question really needs to be, it's not about being better than anybody else. It's being better than you were before. So it's all about you. And I think if I'm sort of going back and I'm trying to get my team with passion, I'd be resetting their expectations. I'd be making them feel secure that they're in a job. You can tell them what's going on within the marketplace, but I'd also be then developing training and development plans that would be constant throughout. So it's not just usual, here's a 2-day plan, your next training will be in 3-4 months. Weekly, every single week, we're doing certain things to help people develop their skills. You talk about David Beckham, he trained the same things constantly over and over and over again to become world class at those. What we don't do in recruitment is train those skills over and over and over again. What we do is we train the skill, send them out on the pitch to play, and hope those skills improve whilst they're playing the game. Well, that's not what people should be doing. We should be then reassessing those skills all the time, developing. The more you develop your people, the more they will give back to you. So it's developing them in the right way and driving them in the right way that is really important. So as you said, know their strengths, but complement their weaknesses and how you do that. And that means knowing the strengths of your team all the way through and creating teams where they have different types of strengths and pulling on each other. So if you look at your management team, you need someone who's a doer, you need someone who's an analyst, you need someone who's a thinker, you can need someone who's going to be creative at better ideas and bringing better ideas to you. If you're all just good at one thing, then you're only going to be able to be good at that thing. So we need to have a very big sort of mixture of what's going on. And I think the other side is we need to start to look at everything that we do and look at there are better ways to improve that. So I think to get people buying into you is look at the processes that they're doing, find out what they moan about. Can it be changed? Can it be developed? Can it be improved? Can we give them better opportunities to sell to their clientele? So that means one thing. It means that we've got 11:42. We've got 3 minutes left of this webinar. So let me give you an idea of what's going to happen in next week's webinar. So next week on the 30th, we're going to be talking about right people, right place. That's about creating a cohesive team. It's about complementing skills rather than being a group of disparate individuals, and potentially we're looking at what is the strategic goal and task that you should be achieving and how you take your team on that journey to make sure that they completely buy into your business and drive your business forward. As we said, I said we'd also tell you who the guest speaker is and what that guest speaker is talking about. So the guest speaker in 4 weeks' time is a guy called Phil Davis. Phil Davis is an ex-Welsh rugby international. He took Leeds, as it was at the stage, from the 4th division into the Premiership and led them quite high up the Premiership before he disappeared and went back to Wales. Whilst in Wales, he led Cardiff and then took on the Welsh under-21s. Part of the Welsh under-21s, as that progressed, he then got asked to coach Namibia, not the best known rugby club in the world or the rugby team in the world, but he coached Namibia and took them to the World Cup. And what you've got to start to think about teams like that, teams that haven't got the most talented of players, but they'll have prima donnas. And as we've all talked, we've had prima donnas in our business, etc. He worked a formula that would either make the prima donnas work in the way that he wanted to work and the team work, or he got rid of those prima donnas. And he'll be talking an awful lot about that and how that culture and how to create a culture that is all about driving success. So if you've already subscribe to these webinars, that same link will get you into all 4 webinars. Let's say next week webinar again will be a very interesting webinar, and we're all building up to the Phil Davis webinar. So if you know anybody else in recruitment that's interested in these webinars, feel free to add them on. Okay, if you want to speak to anybody at Jump, then there's our number. Feel free to give us a call. If you want to talk about anything that we've talked about today, feel free to give us a call on that number. If you want to talk about doing employee surveys, etc., give us a call. And one thing that we're offering at the moment, we're offering a free hour consultation to anybody who's not already had that consultation with us, where you can talk about your business, your issues and your problems, and we can potentially tell you how you can produce a better opportunity as we come out of lockdown. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always good to finish on time, especially when Mr. Jacobs is joining us, because he likes to talk and likes to talk an awful lot. Paul, Dave and Paul, I'd like to thank you for your time. It's been very much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed the session. I look forward to seeing you next week. If you've got any comments, please put them to us. If you want to post anything on LinkedIn, feel free to do that. I look forward to seeing you next week. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Jump Advisory, and we are over. Thank you.